KP.
KPC.
News. Information. Culture. KPCC.
California sensibility.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Lehrer.
And I'm Amy Choi, and we are the Mashup Americans.
Okay, so Ames, I think you're going to like this. Every once in a while, somebody will come up to me or write to me and say, like, it's so great that you're doing journalism. And I basically am like, that is just not true. I'm not a journalist. And you come from a journalism background, so you can understand.
It's true, I'm a journalista.
Sí, pero I'm not. And I have no pretenses of it. And I'm really clear about what my perspective is. That brings me to this idea that we both share, which is that maybe there's no neutral, actually, right? There's not really an objective point of view either way.
Totally. And I think that's one of the things that is so contrarian to journalists. Like, one of the big philosophical tenets of journalism is that, like, we can always be objective. But we all live within our own biases, our own perspectives, our own lives. And I think the best thing you can do as a journalist, should you ever decide to become one, and also, just like the best thing you can do as a human being, is to recognize our own biases and be empathetic and open to hearing other people's stories.
That brings me to our guest today, the magnificent Maria Hinojosa.
Love her.
You've probably heard her on NPR. She is the host of Latino USA. She is the president and founder of Futuro Media Group. She has this amazing career as a journalist where she's telling other people's stories. And she doesn't do it just in contrast to here's the neutral mainstream story and here's the minority or mashup response. She's telling those stories as they have their own value.
Totally. She is 100% telling the stories of a real America, like painting a picture of what our country looks like. She has a new election special coming up. It's called The New Deciders, and it digs into what really matters to Mashup Americans in this election. She's talking to Black millennials, Latino evangelicals, Asian American politicians, and she just has this incredibly rich collection of stories that everybody's going to get to see on PBS next week. So we went up to her offices in Harlem to talk about the election special, but also to talk about, Harlem, how much she loves chocolate, which we were like, we do too. So,
And her family.
And we had a great conversation.
Enjoy. So, Maria, how do you mash up?
Every day?
Yeah, that's a good one.
No, I mean, I literally mash up every day
Yeah.
because everything from the moment that I wake up is like a mashup. I wake up and there's jazz playing on the radio, which is on 24 hours. I'm making Café Bustelo. Mm-hmm. It is decaf, but I am drinking my Café Bustelo. My kids are mashed up because they're Dominican, Mexican, American, right? So, and New Yorkers to boot. I mash up in the sense that my son's best friends now are mostly Muslim from Somalia and from Pakistan. But he's studying Chinese. Yeah. And he wants to go, do a semester abroad in Paris to look at fashion. Right outside on the street corner, there are women in full African attire who sit outside of the subway stop on 125th Street, the A train, that historic train. And they are looking for women to braid their hair. Yeah. So they look at me and they're just like, oh, she's just part of the neighborhood. Like, they're not making an offer to do my hair because they see me every day.
You're like, wait, I'm on a vacation in Jamaica. Right. I'm just like a white girl on vacation. I need my braids done.
And then, right, no. And then, there's a taco truck right outside. Yeah. I mash up because my mom lives part of the year in Mexico. And so she's now in Chicago. And so we're like, she's now doing the Chicago thing, when a month ago she was in Mexico, solamente hablándome como bien mamá mexicana, and all of a sudden now she's in Chicago and she's talking English with me with her Chicago accent.
So I grew up in Chicago. There's always these lists, because I think Chicago people have angst about New York in some way, about what's better in Chicago or what's better in New York. And there was recently a story on what's the one thing that New Yorkers who are from Chicago miss, and it's the tamales.
Really?
And the Mexican food. Mexican food in New York is the
So I'll just have you know that I have been importing my tortillas from Chicago
Thank you.
for about 35 years. Even still now, I try not to eat too many tortillas, but I have
Can't
boxes.
stop me.
I have boxes being sent from Chicago. And
Really?
I
From
give
where?
them-
From who?
I guess
the
it's
secret?
product placement, but it's El Milagro tortillas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
so-
if it counts, my mother-in-law recently just brought a shipment of her tortillas because my husband obviously can't live without them. So she comes with it's like a Ziploc bag with 2
Yeah.
paper plates and like 15 tortillas.
You freeze them.
And then we freeze them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she brings it's her whole luggage. She goes back home with
This is
empty
my
luggage.
family, it's pupusas, but we live in LA, so like when my cousins were living in DC, where there's also a Salvadoran population, but they would still come back to school with like a bag full of them, and then just like they have a special freezer just for their pupusas and
think it's really
queso
important.
patacon. Yeah, you have to
so,
know.
so imagine if in our United States, these would be the conversations that we would be having.
Exactly.
Right about like, oh my God, the Afghani tamale maker,
Yeah.
or the bagel store down the street that
Yeah.
is owned by Filipinos, but the people who make the bagels are Colombians and Mexicans.
Yes.
Or the fact that you
Absolute
have
bagels.
kimchi, kimchi tacos, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, like imagine if we would sit around and talk about all the possibilities of
Yeah.
what we could do.
We want to do a quick speed round with you. What's always in your fridge?
These days, kale, Brussels sprouts,
Tortillas.
tortillas
Del Milagro.
from
Del
El
Milagro.
Milagro, and now my daughter's doing a lot of almond milk.
What is your comfort food?
My comfort food is popcorn with salt and dark chocolate.
Yes. What do you spend money on that your parents never would?
I mean, my guilty pleasures are expensive body soap and expensive toothpaste.
What's your
Toothpaste can be
brand?
expensive?
Marvis. What's that one?
You named it?
Yeah.
That's my brand.
I don't even know. I don't even know how much it costs, but every time I see it in someone's house, I'm like, this is a fancy toothpaste.
It's a fancy toothpaste, and I've got this thing about toothpaste from Europe that I'm just like,
Yeah.
I want to find the perfect toothpaste from Europe. And so, yes,
Yeah.
I do spend more money on that toothpaste than I should. And then I do Bliss.
Bliss.
Oh, yeah.
I use
Smells
the
very
Bliss body soap. I'm very Mexican, so I do water it down halfway. So I go,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so it's
And by
like,
Mexican,
I buy
you mean like smart.
Yeah. It's my
hello.
super expensive body wash, but then I water it down so that it lasts twice as long.
Yeah, duh. So now it's just the same price as normal.
Yeah.
What's your favorite swear word?
One that comes out a lot is just coño. It just comes out a lot. And I know that it's kind of insulting for people.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's not very Mexican. It's from the Dominican Republic,
Right.
from my husband.
Yeah.
That is the one that comes out the most.
Mine is puchica, which is only
Oh,
Salvadoran.
well, of course. Well, when
But
I was
didn't know that. So
when
I'd
I
always
was
be saying
almost going to marry a Salvadoran, it was like, Puch!
it always
Puchica.
Yeah, you can
you
can see the
you gotta
musical
go,
notes.
"Puchica."
Yeah, always. Puchica. I always thought that was just a normal Spanish, just not. It's just Salvadoran only.
Gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day I die, I'ma touch the sky.
Hola. Please give us 5 estrellas on iTunes. It helps people find us, and it also makes us feel really good. iTunes.com/mashup, 5 estrellas. Gracias.
My mama hopped in that U-Haul van. Any pessimists, I ain't talk to them. Plus, I ain't had no phone in my apartment.
Like just getting off of the subway and walking to the office, it was this kind of incredible and immediate immersion in Mashup America. We think that we're really lucky. We're like in LA and we're in New York, that we're already in such a diverse community and more so than I think in a lot of places in the US. But here you really feel it and see it and smell it and hear it more than anywhere else.
So that's why we wanted to be in Harlem. I mean, I live in Harlem. I have for almost 20 years now. But the whole idea behind having the company, Futuro Media Group, based in Harlem on 125th Street, was essentially to say, we produce national media from this location.
So your new series coming out is called The New Deciders. What does it mean to be a decider in the U.S.? Is it wealth and then therefore an ability to make change or have influence? I mean, when you think about The New Deciders, what does that mean?
The emphasis for this PBS election special is about how people of color, immigrants, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, Latino evangelicals, how they're getting engaged, right? They have been deciders in the past.
Right.
In many ways, because of the nature of the election campaign this year, a lot of them are being pushed into being new deciders.
Right.
Like maybe these are people who were not necessarily engaged, did not necessarily think about voting as an important manifestation of their civic participation. But if you are Arab American in Cleveland, if you are Muslim American in Cleveland, and these are communities that have been there for a long time, but all of a sudden it's like now you're being called out because you're wearing a headscarf, even though you've grown up in this community and there was never any issue around the fact that your family was practicing Muslim, but now as a teenager, now you're being made fun of because you're wearing a headscarf.
Yeah.
How did that happen where it was okay and now all of a sudden there's a certain element of Islamophobia, right?
Right.
Now those people are getting engaged.
Yeah.
And saying our voice needs to be heard. So it's like they've been here. These are not necessarily new communities.
Yeah.
But because of this particular electoral dynamic, many of them are feeling like we've got to get engaged now.
Yeah.
And those are the stories that we're telling.
Right.
It's about the now.
Well, so I think, when in talking about those communities in the new series, so we have Black millennials, Latino evangelicals, there's Arab American community in the Midwest, Asian American politicians becoming more active. What are the kind of overall forces that are shaping all this activism? You said, is it the political climate, like just the political climate right now? Like what is pushing all of these groups now to the forefront?
I mean, this is an election year, right? So I think this wouldn't be happening in 2015, for example. I mean, it started in 2015. There is a feeling like what is happening politically is so kind of unpredictable and new that it is sparking conversations. So, for example, with Arab Americans and Muslim Americans in Cleveland, it's sparking the conversation of like, wow, okay, we're going to start doing voter registration right after we do prayer at mosque. And even though people may have been on the fence about registering to vote before, thinking that it didn't really matter, now they're taking a second look. That's a direct result of the historical moment that we're living in.
What are you most optimistic about with the new deciders?
That you find political engagement in the places where, you just didn't imagine that it would be. And I feel so blessed to be able to see that, whether I'm in Orange County, California, or whether I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, or whether I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, or in Orlando, Florida, to just see individual people who are making decisions about getting involved. Like, I love that.
We hear the insanity happening with Voldemort, he who shall not be named. And, as a Latina, what do you as like a person feel when you hear something like, well, there's going to be a wall built, or all of the xenophobic, racist things, just like blatantly racist, that are being batted around as if this were dialogue? Or if this is conversation.
So it's interesting when you ask me, like, if I take off my journalist hat and I'm thinking about this, I'm a mom.
Right.
So I'm thinking about how this is impacting my kids. And my kids are not little kids. My son is 20, my daughter's 18. So they're deeply aware.
And are they voting in their first
and
presidential?
And they will both be voting in their first presidential election. I think about what all of this, the kind of impact that it's having on them long term. The things that are boiling up to the surface because of the kind of rhetoric that we're hearing, and what that means in terms of how they're going to have to engage in a society that may look at them as, in turn, at some point, the future and hopeful and positive, and in other moments, there will be others who see them as a threat because they are young Latinos, they're millennials, they're going to vote. Their parents are immigrants, and so some people might look at them and say, your parents shouldn't be here, or you shouldn't be here. I mean, I'm Mexican. My husband is from the Dominican Republic, but I'm Mexican. So for them, the wall is real. When they say that, they understand, oh, you're trying to build a wall between the United States, where I was born, and the country, my mother's country, where my grandmother lives. As an American, I refuse to let any politician instill a sense of fear in me in terms of my country.
Just about your American story, becoming an American. So when did that happen? And did being a journalist have something to do with deciding to become an American?
So the American citizen decision happened in the late 1980s for me. And truly, it happened because I was very happy traveling with my green card and my green Mexican passport. I loved it. I felt like I had the best of both worlds. But one day in the mid-1980s, when I was actually doing budding journalism as a college student, and I was reporting about Central American refugees, like we are now, but this is at the height of
the war.
Of the wars in Central America. And I came back to the United States. I flew in from I don't know what country, and I got into JFK, and I just had this moment where I felt like, oh my gosh, one day I'm going to be coming through that line, and they're going to take my green card, and they're going to say, yeah, no. Nope. Yeah, your green card has been revoked. And then I'm standing there like, what do you mean? And they're like, yep, sorry, it's been revoked. And so that was the thing that made me say, hold on a second. I never want that to happen. And I never want to be in that position. So actually it was a little bit of like, oh, I don't know if I can feel really protected without my citizenship. Like I really was going to be coming back to this country. Yeah. Not this illusion like one day I'm just going to pick it all up and move to Mexico. Like I had to realize like, no, you live here. So that was the American citizenship part. And of course, because I was also a journalist, just like I can't be reporting on people voting and not be able to do that myself. And so there was that. The becoming an American, per se, I think it was probably when I was getting ready to give birth to my son. And when I was telling my husband, well, I don't know, I really loved growing up with my Mexican passport. Maybe I should go to Mexico and have my baby. Maybe we should go to the Dominican Republic and have the baby there because, oh my God, that means that the child will have a sense of like their international roots and presence. And my husband just looked at me and he said, you're crazy. Why would you think about having a child in any place that you don't know well, where you don't know the healthcare system, where et cetera, et cetera? The child is from here, and we are from here. And this baby that will be born in New York is a New Yorker, and this is who we are. And it was almost that simple for my husband to say, we need to own that we're Americans. And then I was like, okay. I've traveled all 50 states, plus 2 territories, Guam and Puerto Rico. And when I move in the United States, I actually don't move from a place of fear. I move from a place of I can engage anyone, I can talk to anyone, I can ask anyone anything. I am a part and parcel of this country. I encounter a lot of ignorance, but in many times the ignorance that I encounter is not necessarily met with equal amounts of kind of hatred. I find a lot of ignorance, but I think that there isn't this like knee-jerk hatred. And so I feel very hopeful. And it makes me want to do more of the work that I do.
That I think that's incredibly moving. And as a mom, I completely relate to that idea of like, when you gave birth to your son, you were like, okay, we are in it now. Like, this is real. What advice would you give to other parents who are seeing this happen with their kids? Like, I know people who have like 10-year-olds who come back home and they're afraid. They're like, are we going to have to leave, mommy? And that's terrifying.
It is terrifying. And actually, what's really scary is that when I was 6 years old, I was having that same conversation because way back then in history, George Wallace was running for president. And George Wallace was the one who was making those kinds of veiled threats. And so I did, when I was 6 years old, wonder and speak to my family about, are we going to have to leave? So the thought that, almost 50 years later, you're having the same exact conversations. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, my daughter in high school was hearing Mexican jokes being told to her. And this was before Donald Trump. So I think you have to surround yourself with community, with families who share your kind of outlook on life. And of course, that means families of every diverse background, to build up your sense of community wherever you are. And in that sense, try to stake our claim for our country. How do you respond to hatred? It's very difficult. The only way that you can respond is by saying, we're filled with love and we're the future and we're not afraid of you and don't be afraid of us.
Yeah.
But that's really simplistic. When your child comes home and says, Mom, somebody built a wall in my school as a prank, which we know happened in, I believe it was North Carolina. How do you soothe that pain? I don't think there is a silver bullet. And so we need to be prepared for the suffering of our children, of our colleagues, of our friends and families who are going to come back and say, I feel targeted, I don't feel welcome, I feel unsafe. We're going to have to find a way to soothe that. The other response is stand up and be counted. And I know that that's kind of trite, but this is the time to jump in.
Yeah.
It's not the time to pull back, it's the time to jump in, and that is part of our healing. And I think that that's what democracy looks like.
To see and be seen on every level, right?
Yeah.
We want to hear about what's important to you this election. So come join us at facebook.com/mashupamericans and tell us your stories.
Do you ever feel like you have to or do speak for all Latinos when you have this voice, or all Mexican Americans?
I feel a tremendous weight on my shoulders. To be honest with you, I'm just me, right? Like, as my daughter says, Mom, less Maria Hinojosa, more mom. So, if I'm just like the mom, I just want to be close to my family and my kids and feel safe. The Maria Hinojosa part of me feels like I have to jump in. I have to say certain things. I do not believe I'm a representative of anything except for my own experience. But, I've been around the block enough that when I say certain things, I know that they're resonating. So, for example, just recently, I was part of a public conversation around journalism, and the whole question of objectivity and subjectivity came in. And I just said, well, for us, the big question is, who's the decider, right?
Yeah.
So who gets to decide what is 100% clean objective?
Well, don't you know that only white male judges are the most objective judges?
Exactly.
That's what I've recently learned.
Right. So then it's just like, oh, okay, so you guys get to own objectivity.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, no.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the beauty of what we're living through is,
Right.
which is just be able to raise those questions. So in that sense, when I put on my I'm representing hat, I feel like I ask those questions and I pose those challenging issues, not for me personally, but rather for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that the truth is that a lot of us feel like we're reluctant leaders. We don't speak for entire communities. We can't. We're so complex. But at the same time, we are being held up. Like, say something. So you have to own your responsibility and at the same time be really humble and just be like, I don't really want to speak for everybody. This is kind of how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And who you are does also inform the kinds of stories that you seek out. So we were, thinking about this. We started off this whole conversation being like, wow, Harlem, like this energy, all the cultures that you see outside, all the languages that you hear. And this is the place from which you're telling these stories. So you already are kind of infused with that all the time and thinking about that when you're seeking stories. It's not just that the only interesting story out there happens to be about like a white, straight man who has something interesting happen to them.
Exactly, which is why we were adamant in that we wanted to be in a community. It's lucky that it's a historical community like Harlem, but we wanted to be in a community that represents total diversity, to say this is where national journalism can be produced. And we can produce it.
Yep. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Maria.
talking to us. We're so excited for you to tell these stories.
And it's my pleasure.
I feel pumped.
Yeah.
I can't wait to vote now. I'm like, woo! Ready to go.
All right.
Yay, we need that.
That was Maria Hinojosa, president of Futuro Media Group and executive producer and host of Latino USA. Check her out on Twitter at Maria_Hinojosa.
I am fired up. I'm ready to get my notebook, get on the road, go to press conferences, be a journalist.
Oh, really? Are you really?
No, not really. But I'll watch Maria do it.
Yeah, I think let's leave that to her. We do our thing. So everyone check out Maria's election special called The New Deciders on PBS. Or you can always just take the 2-3 train and visit her and the other crew at Futuro Media Group in Harlem. It's pretty dope up there.
It is so dope. And the Mashup Americans are me, Amy Choi.
And me, Rebecca Lehrer. Our producer today was Jocelyn Gonzalez. Our show is produced by American Public Media and Southern California Public Radio, KPCC.
We're also supported in part by an award from the National Endowment for the Arts on the web at arts.gov. Later.
Bye.